A wife wants a break to find herself, leaving her husband with a painful choice: let her go or fight to keep her. When he discovers the truth behind her request, everything changes. Ethan Roberts, a dedicated CEO of his family's business, had planned a surprise getaway to commemorate nearly 2 decades of marriage with his wife, Sarah. Unbeknownst to him, their lives were on the cusp of a seismic shift. At 49, Ethan had devoted himself to growing the family company, balancing his responsibilities as a leader with a commitment to the community in Austin, Texas. He had built steady, fulfilling life and felt a genuine reason to celebrate this milestone. "Evening, honey," Ethan greeted warmly as he stepped into the kitchen after a full day at the office. Sarah glanced up from her seat at the table, her expression guarded, as if concealing something. "I thought you'd be home earlier," she remarked with a touch of coolness, her gaze shifting to the small blue envelope in his hand. "What's with a blue envelope?" "Valentine's Day was last week. I had a few last-minute things to handle," Ethan explained, setting his briefcase down. He tapped the envelope gently, the anticipation clear in his eyes. "I wanted to go over this with you tonight." Ethan took a seat across from Sarah and noticed 2 glasses of red wine already poured. Beside her glass lay a pen and a notebook, an unusual combination that piqued his interest. She seemed distant, almost as if she had rehearsed something in her mind. "How was your day?" Sarah asked with a hint of indifference, a tone that made Ethan feel she was not entirely present. "It was fine," he replied, careful in his words, his gaze drifting to the notebook beside her. "But I have a feeling this isn't just about my day, is it?" Sarah exhaled deeply, gathering her thoughts. "You're right," she began, her voice carrying a weight he didn't expect. "I've been thinking a lot about my life, about us. Recently, I reconnected with some old friends from my college days. Losing 2 close friends to cancer over the past year made me start to question where I'm going with my life." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "And that leads me to our marriage." Ethan's expression softened, though his mind raced with unease. 25 years is a long time," Sarah continued, her gaze distant. "Some of my college friends are already on their 2nd, even 3rd marriages." She leaned back in her chair, her tone becoming more contemplative. "So, where does that leave us? What holds us together? And more importantly, what's going to keep us together in the years to come?" Ethan listened carefully, processing her words, sensing a vulnerability he hadn't anticipated. "I understand," he responded slowly. "I've thought about this too. A lot of men go through a midlife crisis, buying flashy cars or seeking new thrills. I'm grateful I didn't go down that path. I have an incredible wife who keeps me grounded. How can I make this next phase of our lives even better?" Sarah offered a faint smile. "That's what I've always admired about you, Ethan. You're thoughtful. Most men wouldn't even try to understand." She took a breath, her tone steady but laced with a new resolve. "But I think I know what I need to do. My whole life, I've always been part of someone else's world. First, it was my father's house, then college, and then here, this home that your parents gave us as a wedding gift. Being your wife has been wonderful, but I've never really lived for myself. I feel like a character in someone else's story." Ethan felt a pang in his chest, realizing the depth of her words. "I need to figure out who I am outside of this life," Sarah said firmly. "If I don't, I feel like I'll lose myself completely." She took a steadying breath before continuing. "I want to take a break. I need a year to live on my own, away from everything and everyone. A year without contact between us, so we can both reflect." Ethan stared at her, his world beginning to fracture. "No contact at all?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice even. "I understand needing space, but nothing at all. That seems extreme." Sarah nodded, her resolve unwavering. "It will be challenging for both of us," she admitted, "but I believe it's the only way I can truly understand who I am. After a year, we can meet and decide what's next." Ethan was left speechless, his thoughts tumbling over each other, grappling to make sense of her decision. The anticipation he'd felt earlier that evening was now clouded with doubt and an unexpected fear. "Our lives are so tightly woven together," Sarah continued, her voice calm but unyielding. Untangling them, even temporarily, will be incredibly difficult. But I need to understand who I am without this role of being your wife. She then outlined her plan for the year. They would each pursue their own interests and follow their individual paths. Sarah shared her desire to enroll in courses on psychology and self-development, areas she'd been curious about for years. It's almost like a sabbatical, she added, her voice picking up a trace of enthusiasm. Couples in the military are separated for long periods and manage to come back even stronger. This can work for us, too. But Ethan felt a creeping chill. You mentioned living independently and seeing other people. He started, the question heavy on his mind. Does that mean dating others? Sarah offered a faint, almost casual smile. Perhaps, she replied softly. I doubt anyone will be lining up to take me out to fancy dinners, though. Ethan's expression darkened, tension clear in his voice. And if you do meet someone, does that mean you'd? He struggled to finish the sentence, his emotions raw. Sarah hesitated, then shrugged. Maybe. How can I truly know myself without exploring all aspects of independence? You've been the only man in my life, Ethan. It's time I stand on my own. Ethan's face grew taut, his emotions surfacing. You seem to be forgetting one crucial thing. Sarah, we're married. We took vows to stand by each other through everything. I've honored those vows, and I expect you to do the same. Sarah's response was steady but dismissive. Let's see where we are in a year, she replied, brushing off his concerns. We can figure things out then. Ethan's patience was wearing thin. There's no guarantee you'll even want to come back, he said, his voice rising slightly. What if you fall in love with someone else? What if I'm no longer the one you want? Oh, Ethan, don't be so dramatic, Sarah scoffed. It's just physical freedom. When this year ends, you'll be grateful to return to the life we've built. I'm doing this for us. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. A year without contact. It seemed unbearably distant. Why can't we try therapy together, he suggested, trying to find a middle ground. But Sarah shook her head, resolute. Talking isn't enough, Ethan. I need to live it. Without a real break, I'll never learn to rely on myself. I need this time to come back stronger, for both of us. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can survive this. But Sarah remained calm. Ethan, it's better to endure a year of growth and discomfort than to harbor resentment indefinitely. In the long run, we'll both be better for it. Ethan felt his heart sinking. When are you planning to leave? He asked, his tone hollow. I've already secured an apartment at Oakwood Lofts, Sarah replied, sounding more like she was managing a project than dismantling her marriage. I'll start moving out by the weekend. Ethan was silent, stunned. Can't we at least talk this through more thoroughly before you go through with it, he pleaded. Sarah reached out, gently touching his hand. I'm grateful for your willingness to discuss this, she said softly. Believe me, this will ultimately bring us closer. I love you for understanding. Ethan pulled his hand back, his voice laced with hurt. You're giving me too much credit, Sarah. I don't understand why you're doing this, and I don't agree with it. It feels like my feelings don't even matter. Without another word, Ethan rose from the table, his mind spinning. I'm overwhelmed, Sarah. I don't even know how to process this right now, he admitted, his voice strained. Maybe we should sleep on it and start figuring things out tomorrow. Are you coming to bed, or has the separation already begun? Not yet, Ethan, Sarah replied quietly. I still have some final arrangements to make for the move, but I'll join you soon. With a heavy heart, Ethan climbed the stairs to their bedroom, collapsing onto the bed, but sleep wouldn't come. His thoughts were a tangled mess of confusion and heartache, a whirlwind of unanswered questions. Later that night, Sarah slipped quietly into bed beside him, gently pressing her body against his. She kissed his shoulder, and he felt the warmth of her tears on his skin as she whispered, I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'm sorry too, Sarah, he murmured, his voice barely audible. I love you, she whispered, her words thick with emotion. After a long pause, Ethan asked, Is this the last time I'll hear you say that? Her voice was soft but filled with hope. I want this to make us stronger, not drive us apart. I'm leaving to become a better wife, a better partner, and I will come back. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in years, he didn't prepare Sarah's morning coffee. Instead, he left the house quietly, got into his car, and drove to meet his closest friend Lucas. Ethan needed advice, a clear perspective from someone he trusted. As they sat in the corner booth of a bustling cafe, Riverside Brew, Ethan poured out the details of Sarah's plan. Lucas listened attentively, his expression turning serious as Ethan finished. Honestly, Ethan, it sounds like she's already got someone in mind, but doesn't want to make it official yet. She's testing the waters to see what else is out there, and if it doesn't work out, she'll come back to you, acting as though she's rejuvenated and ready to be the perfect wife again. Right now, you're just her safety net while she figures things out. Ethan's face fell as he absorbed Lucas's words. How am I supposed to stop her from treating me like that? Let her go, Lucas said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. But don't sit around waiting. The moment she moves out, file for divorce. Show her that if she leaves, you won't be here waiting. Divorce proceedings take about 6 months. If, by then, you still want her back, just don't sign the final papers. This way, you stay in control, Lucas continued. And remember, if she crosses that line with someone else, and you take her back, it'll only be easier for her to do it again. Stay calm, and don't let your emotions get the best of you. Leaving Sunset Motors later that afternoon, where he just bought a sleek, black convertible on impulse, Ethan felt a flicker of defiance. If things are going this way, I might as well enjoy this here myself, he joked to Lucas, smiling as he climbed into his new car. When he arrived home that evening, Sarah was already there, pacing the living room with an anxious look on her face. Ethan, where have you been? She asked, her voice tinged with worry. I missed you this morning. I've been thinking about everything we discussed last night, and can we talk about it some more? Ethan kept his tone even. I needed some time alone to think. Took a drive, cleared my head. I've done a lot of thinking, too. I could take the day off tomorrow if you want to talk things through, Sarah offered, her voice softening. I know I threw a lot at you last night, and I'm worried about us. A spark of resentment flickered within Ethan as she sought his comfort despite her decision. Taking a deep breath, he replied, I need more time, Sarah. I have to process what this separation truly means for us. I'll be in my study. Door closed, phone off. After a pause, he added, Why don't we stick to our usual dinner time? I'll handle everything tonight, so you don't need to worry about cooking or cleaning. Sarah nodded, appearing relieved at his offer, but the air was still thick with tension. Later, as they sat down to dinner, a strange silence lingered between them. Sarah began to share her plans about the move to her new apartment and the courses she was excited to start. By the way, would it be all right if I took some of the furniture? She asked, her tone hopeful. Ethan nodded briefly. Sure, but I don't think everything will fit in an apartment that size. What are you planning for the rest? When Sarah suggested leaving some items at the house, Ethan's face hardened. If you're leaving, then take everything you'll need. This isn't a backup option in case things don't work out. Sarah's hopeful tone faltered. You're okay with me taking the bed, but now you're making this hard, she asked, frustration breaking through. What am I supposed to do if I can't leave things here? Ethan met her gaze, his voice firm. If you want independence, act like it. You chose to live on your own, so handle it. There's storage units all over the city. Rent one. The conversation quickly escalated into an argument about logistics, frustration simmering on both sides. Finally, Ethan decided to confront her intentions head-on. Sarah, ever since you brought this up, I've been thinking, if I'm supposed to be without a wife for a while, maybe I should consider a different direction in my own life, too. Sarah looked at him, stunned. What different direction? Well, he replied coolly, maybe I should think about seeing someone else, too. Someone younger. Someone who actually wants the life we've built. Her face reddened in shock. Wait a minute. I'm doing this to become a better partner for you. You're overreacting. There's no need to start talking about someone else. Ethan's voice hardened. You made it clear my feelings didn't matter, Sarah. You planned to do what you wanted regardless of how I felt. If I'm going to have a wife who wants to be with other men, Then maybe it's time I explore my options too. Let's see where this year takes us. Their argument reached a boiling point, and eventually, Sarah stormed out, leaving Ethan alone in the living room. An unopened blue envelope with his anniversary travel plans lay on the coffee table, a silent reminder of what might have been. In the days that followed, Ethan threw himself into work and cautiously embraced his newfound independence. He redecorated the house, removing family photos and replacing them with framed posters from jazz festivals he'd attended and memorabilia from his favorite sports teams. He even started grilling out on the patio more often, playing jazz music at full volume, little things Sarah had always disapproved of. Meanwhile, Sarah moved into her new apartment at Oakwood Lofts and enrolled in her first class on psychology and personal development at the local community college. At first, she relished this new phase of independence, enjoying the novelty of living on her own for the first time. But as weeks went by, she felt the growing distance from their children, who were bewildered and hurt by her decision. Her phone calls went unanswered, and the regular family dinners she'd once cherished were now distant memories. Over time, both Ethan and Sarah found themselves navigating unfamiliar emotional landscapes. Although he didn't particularly want to, Ethan agreed to attend court-mandated counseling sessions as part of their separation agreement. The therapist guided them through the underlying reasons for the separation, with Sarah insisting on her need to rediscover herself. Ethan, however, remained resolute that her desire to explore her options had crossed a line he couldn't overlook. During this period, Ethan's social circle began to expand. He reconnected with two women he'd met through mutual friends. One was Lisa, a widowed art curator with a teenage son whose warmth and creativity drew Ethan in. The other was Danielle, a former competitive swimmer turned real estate agent, whose practical nature and humor were refreshing to Ethan. Although he enjoyed their company, he chose to remain celibate, respecting his marriage boundaries until things were legally resolved. Sarah, on the other hand, embraced her freedom with enthusiasm, spending weekends out with friends and enjoying the attention she received from other men. It felt thrilling, even liberating, to make choices for herself without consulting anyone. However, a chance encounter at a downtown bar with a man named Alex led to an unexpected connection. Their chemistry was undeniable, and what started as casual conversation quickly grew into something that blurred the lines of her year of independence. As the months passed, both Ethan and Sarah found their paths diverging. By the time their year of separation neared its end, Sarah seemed confident that Ethan would welcome her back without hesitation. She imagined their reunion, expecting that this period of growth and exploration would be seen as a reset for their relationship. But Ethan had changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her betrayal, real or emotional, had created a rift that seemed unbridgeable. The turning point came when their daughter, Olivia, discovered photos of Sarah with Alex, confirming what Ethan had quietly suspected. The discovery shattered whatever fragile connections still existed between Sarah and her children, driving a wedge that was painful and humiliating. Finally, the day arrived when Ethan and Sarah were scheduled to meet at the law office. Sarah arrived first, dressed in a new, carefully chosen outfit, projecting an air of confidence. She was holding out hope for reconciliation, hoping she could persuade Ethan to forgive her and give their marriage another chance. Ethan entered shortly after, setting a familiar blue envelope on the table between them. "Sorry for the delay," he said, his tone polite but distant. After a brief exchange of greetings, the lawyers got down to business, presenting the divorce papers for them to sign. Once the paperwork was finalized, Ethan turned to Sarah, his expression unreadable. "Is there anything you'd like to say?" he asked, his voice calm but detached. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her emotions. "Ethan, this year was difficult without you, but I feel like I've grown, and I understand more deeply what our marriage truly means. I want to thank you for allowing me this time to reflect. I'm committed to us now, more than ever. Please, give me a chance to prove my loyalty to you." Ethan's face remained impassive as he listened. When she finished, he replied in an even tone, "Trust is everything, Sarah. Without it, love doesn't stand a chance. That's why we're here, signing these divorce papers today. I can only hope we both move forward with honesty. He paused, his gaze steady as he looked at her. I've spent time with other people over this past year, but I kept clear boundaries, he continued, his voice calm. Can you say the same, Sarah? Were you faithful to me? Sarah blinked, momentarily caught off guard by his direct question, then quickly replied, Yes, of course. I stayed true to you. Ethan's expression didn't change as he reached into the blue envelope and pulled out a photograph, placing it on the table in front of her. The picture showed Sarah embracing Alex at a bar, clearly more than a casual acquaintance. Is this what you consider loyalty? He asked, his voice laced with quiet disappointment. Sarah's face flushed as she stammered that it was nothing. Just a moment. It didn't mean anything. Without another word, Ethan revealed a second, even more compromising photo. Her eyes widened in shock. Where did you get these? Were you spying on me? She demanded, her voice tinged with panic. Ethan's voice was cold as he answered, Our daughter Olivia's friend took these photos. She happened to be at the same bar. Olivia found out, and it was humiliating for her to see her mother acting this way. Do you have any idea how that affected her? The reality of her choices began to sink in as Sarah's face turned pale, tears welling up in her eyes. Ethan's voice rose with barely controlled anger. You wonder why the kids won't answer your calls. They know more than you think. Turning to his lawyer, Ethan signed the divorce papers and slid them across the table. File them, he said, his tone resolute. Sarah's voice was desperate as she tried to justify herself. Ethan, it was a mistake. It meant nothing. I never thought it would go this far. Please, don't do this. Ethan's gaze was steely, unyielding. That's what makes it worse, Sarah, he replied, his voice even. The fact that it meant nothing to you, yet you still went through with it. Do you understand how deeply that hurts? Her shoulders slumped as the full weight of her choices settled on her. Please, Ethan, I want to be your wife again, she pleaded. I promise I'll be faithful from now on. I don't want to end up alone. Don't turn your back on me. I beg you, forgive me. But her words didn't reach him. Ethan had already made up his mind. Without another glance, he rose, gathered his belongings, and left the room, her pleas fading as he exited the building. That evening, Ethan sat alone at home, a glass of whiskey in hand, reflecting on the long journey that had brought him to this point. The doubts, the heartache, and the quiet resilience he had found within himself over the past year weighed heavily on his mind. Despite the pain, he felt a sense of closure, a realization that he was finally letting go. The following morning, Ethan ignored several calls from Sarah and instead focused on reconnecting with the people who had supported him throughout this ordeal, Lucas, Lisa, and even Danielle, who reached out with words of encouragement. As winter settled over Austin, blanketing the city with a rare dusting of snow, Ethan began to carve out a new path for himself. A few weeks later, Lisa, sensing the emotional toll Ethan had been through, invited him to an art exhibit downtown. They spent the evening immersed in conversation, laughter, and a sense of ease that felt almost foreign after the turbulence of the past year. In Lisa's warmth and genuine kindness, Ethan found the start of something new, their friendship slowly evolving into a deeper connection. Meanwhile, Sarah struggled to adjust to her new reality. She had moved into a smaller, quieter apartment on the edge of town. Financially strained after the divorce, she faced new challenges at every turn. Her attempts to reconnect with their children were met with silence, as their wounds were still too fresh for reconciliation. One day, after missing several days of work, Sarah's boss at the marketing agency pulled her aside. Sarah, we need someone reliable here. I'm sorry, but I have to let you go, he said, his tone firm but regretful. Alone and overwhelmed, Sarah found herself confronting the full extent of her choices. The freedom she had once craved now felt hollow, and the friends who had once accompanied her on late nights out had drifted away. Her financial independence had unraveled, and she realized that the life she had walked away from was now beyond reach. What a fool I've been, she whispered to herself, staring at the empty walls of her apartment. She understood, perhaps too late, that she had thrown away a life she could never get back. As the months passed, Ethan settled into a newfound sense of peace. His life, once filled with uncertainty, had found a new rhythm. He spent more time with his daughter Olivia, who had slowly begun to heal from the hurt caused by her parents' separation. His connection with Lisa grew stronger, and together, they began building new memories, rooted in trust and mutual respect. On the one-year anniversary of their separation, Sarah received the final divorce papers in the mail, the last chapter of a life she had once thought was unbreakable. She signed them with a heavy heart, finally accepting that the love she had taken for granted was now just a memory. In a last attempt at redemption, Sarah penned a heartfelt letter to Ethan, expressing her remorse and hoping for his forgiveness. She sent it, knowing he might never respond, but wanting him to understand the depth of her regret. When Ethan received the letter, he read it in silence, feeling a twinge of sadness for the life they had once shared. He folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and closed it, leaving the past firmly behind him. Moving forward, Ethan continued to find joy in his new life, embracing each day with a renewed sense of purpose. Surrounded by the people who had stood by him, he looked to the future with optimism, content with the choices he had made and the lessons he had learned. This is the end of the story. Friends, share your opinion and thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Secret Stories so you never miss our exciting stories. It will help us a lot in our development. We release new stories daily.